What happened to American men's tennis? This is going to be a response video to my original video that was titled What Happened to American Tennis, where I explained the situation in the women's game and the men's game, which is quite different. The American women have always dominated the professional game, and they're still doing so. However, the men used to dominate the world tennis scene and are not doing too well right now. So I'm going to get into some things that you guys wrote in the comment section, and thank you very much for commenting. There's been a lot of comments on this video, and I appreciate your input, and I'm going to respond to some of the things that you guys mentioned. But I'm going to start off this video with an interesting ranking. I want you to check out the rankings from 1991 and then compare it to the American male rankings to 2021. And take a look at the discrepancy in the quality of players. Okay, so this is super interesting, guys. So here are the top 10 Americans in 1991. And it starts with Lendl, Courier, Agassi, Sampras, Chang, Wheaton, McEnroe, Gilbert. And mind you, all these guys are inside the top 20. So there were 8 players inside the top 20 in 1991. And then number 9 is Renneberg, and number 10 is Rostagno. And Rostagno, ranked number 10 in the United States, was ranked number 23 in the world. And here are the top 10 Americans in 2021. Isner, Fritz, Opelka, Sandgren, Querrey, Paul, Tiafoe, Giron, Johnson, and Korda. And what I found really interesting in the comparison between these two rankings is that the 10th American player, Derek Rostagno, coming in at 23 in the world, was ranked higher than the number 1 American today, John Isner, ranked at 25 in the world. In my original video, What Happened to American Tennis, I explained that the Europeans are dominating the world tennis scene because they transition a lot better from the junior circuit onto the professional circuit. In fact, there's absolutely nothing wrong with American junior tennis. Right now, the Americans are dominating the ITF junior scene. On the men's side, there's 15 players inside the top 100 ITF junior rankings. This has always been the case, and this is still the case today. So obviously, juniors are doing fine, but something happens in the transition. So when the players are transitioning from the junior circuit onto the adult circuit, this is where Europe has a big advantage. And if you want to know in detail why this is the case, check out my original video. And many of you guys asked me in the comment section, rightfully so, why did the Americans dominate 30 years ago and they're not doing so anymore? What has changed? The system in Europe has been around for a long time. So how were the Americans able to dominate back then? And I have a couple of explanations on why this is the case. And the reason why I picked the rankings from 30 years ago is because I believe this is when Europe began to change. And if you guys remember what happened in 1991, this is when Europe began to open up. And now Eastern Europe, who before had very limited possibilities as far as tennis, when it comes to travel, when it comes to training opportunities, and so forth. And now Europe has opened up, and there was a larger pool of players to choose from, and overall the level of play went up. In my original video, I talked about the German club system, which helps so many players reach the high level because they're exposed to a higher level of play very early on. And interestingly, it's not only Germans that benefit from this system, because in Germany anybody can play on a team. So a lot of teams will buy foreign players. In some instances, you have teams who have no Germans on the team. So the entire Europe high-level tennis community is benefiting from this system because you have players from all over playing in Germany and in France, for example. So everybody is exposed to this system and are benefiting from it. Also, back in the day, there used to be clay court specialists, and now this is completely different. Clay court specialists don't exist anymore. The surfaces have been evened out. They all play very similar. And now we don't have what we had in the past where players preferred fast courts or slow courts. Now, in Southern Europe, these were primarily clay court specialists. Countries such as Spain or Italy had very few players who preferred to play on fast courts. And now this has changed because there's more hard courts in Europe. I can tell you personally that before I went to the United States to play college tennis, I had played on a hard court maybe a handful of times. There's absolutely no hard courts in Germany to speak of, and this is going back 20 years. Now the situation has changed. There's a lot more hard courts, and players are exposed to many different surfaces. A lot of you guys wrote in the comment section of my original video that the reason why Europeans are dominating tennis is because of clay. And I'm going to tell you that this is not quite true. Yes, it is absolutely an advantage to grow up on clay. When I grew up in Germany, we played on clay from May to September. Very slow clay. It's a very slow surface because of the weather conditions in Germany. Now, on the other hand, in the wintertime, we played on carpet. So the discrepancy between these two surfaces was very interesting because you had to learn how to play on a super slow surface, but then you also had to learn how to play on a super fast surface. This is great to developing a complete, well-rounded player. And the USTA knows that this is the case. So what has been happening here in Southeast Florida, which is the tennis mecca of junior tennis, is that the kids primarily play on clay. Now, it's not the red clay that you play on in Europe, it's the hard true, the green clay. But nevertheless, kids are playing on clay. In fact, the orange ball used to be held in Key Biscayne on hard court, and for the last few years, it's been held at the Frank Veltri Tennis Center in Plantation on clay. And also the USTA has built clay courts at the tennis center in Orlando. So kids are exposed to clay, but despite the fact that most of the kids around here grew up on clay, the American male juniors still have a very difficult time to transition to the professional circuit. So obviously clay is not the only answer. And some of you guys ask me, why are the women doing so great and the men are not doing so great? So one difference between female and male tennis players is that females mature a lot younger than males. This is just fact. It is what it is. So when it comes to transitioning from the junior circuit to the professional circuit, women will have an easier time. They will transition not only easier but also faster, and men take a little bit more time to mature, and therefore the transition is a lot more difficult. Also, the incentive in the United States for a female athlete to do sports is huge, unlike in any countries. I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with Title IX. So Title IX means that, for example, in college tennis, females will have 8 scholarships per team, while the males only have 4.5. So Title IX, because women do not have football, Title IX makes it a little bit more fair for women to get the same amount of scholarships as the men. So therefore, there's a lot more incentives for females to get a scholarship in college, and therefore they're more likely to do sports because of that reason. And some of you guys ask me, why are some countries doing great who didn't used to be great before, and vice versa. They used to have a lot of tennis players and now they don't have that many anymore. And a couple of examples are Canada and Germany. So what's happening in Canada is that we have a lot of talented tennis players, not only on the male side but on the female side. And also in Germany, who used to be tennis superpower, and now the interest for tennis has gone down and there's not as many players competing professionally, both for the men and the women. So first of all, I think that you can become great in any country under any system. It doesn't require a European system to become a great tennis player. One example is Frances Tiafoe, Taylor Fritz, and Riley Opelka, who grew up in the United States and who are fantastic tennis players. So there's always going to be super talented players who are going to do great regardless of what system they grew up in. And this is probably the same in Canada, because it started off with Raonic and Pospisil, and now we have Alia Sim, we have Bianca Andreescu, and we have Denis Shapovalov, and they're kind of pushing each other. And also there's a young player called Leah Fernandez who's going to be great as well. So this is an example of how players can push each other. Maybe they have grown up together in juniors and they see that one is doing incredibly well, and this gives them the belief that they can do it also. Similar case is also in Serbia, where there weren't used to be a lot of great tennis players, and then obviously Djokovic, maybe the greatest of all time or one of the greatest of all time, and now there's a lot of Serbian players in the top 100 in the world. Now on the other hand, you have places like Germany and Sweden, who used to be tennis superpowers, winning Grand Slam, and now obviously when you don't have that anymore, the interest goes down. So also young players see that as less of an incentive to pursue a professional tennis career, when there's generally a lack of interest in tennis in the country they play in. But guys, the reason why I made the original video was because I've been observing this for the last 20 years. I told you that I played college tennis and I saw the same numbers, meaning that the Europeans were dominating college tennis 20 years ago, and they're still doing so today. And the same is the case for the ATP Tour. So I'm not talking about a specific player, I'm talking about the numbers in general. There's 71% of the ATP top 100 are Europeans, and this has to have a reason. This is not a coincidence. And as I stated in my original video, the biggest problem lies in the transition between the junior circuit and the adult circuit. There's a lot of great juniors in the United States. As I told you before, that right now the USA has 15 juniors in the top 100 ITF male junior rankings, more by far than any other country in the world. So what happens to these great juniors? They have a hard time transitioning from that level onto the professional level. And what's lacking the most is a general availability of high-level adult matches. And I'm not talking about the top 3 juniors. They're going to be just fine. They're going to get wild cards into challengers. They're going to do okay. I'm talking about the players in general. These players are going to benefit from a system like they have in Europe that provides them with several ways to play high-level matches, whether it be prize money tournaments, a real national ranking that they're going to use to get paid or get into the tournaments, and a club system where they can play for a team and be exposed to a higher level of play. I'm going to finish this video off with one fact. The United States is by far the best place in the world to play tennis. And some of you guys in the comment section wrote that it's really expensive to play tennis. Yes, that's true. If you hire a private coach or if your junior player goes to an expensive academy, no doubt about it. But that's also expensive. In Europe, there's no difference. Tennis is an expensive sport if you go along that route. However, there's no other country in the world that provides you with free public tennis courts. Look at this. We have 4 courts here in this park. Anybody can show up, bring a couple of rackets and some balls and play tennis. You try doing this in Europe, you have absolutely no chance. You'll have to either get a club membership or pay for court time. So because of this fact that every town in the United States has free public tennis courts, there's absolutely no reason why the United States shouldn't dominate the professional world tennis circuit.